Hello and welcome to The World This Week with Tanya Francis. A look back at some of the biggest global news stories for an international city, brought to you by the London Live news team. Tonight, the rescue mission that caught the world's attention after a 5-year-old boy tragically dies in Morocco after falling 32 metres underground. It's being called the Siege of Ottawa. The capital of Canada comes to a standstill as anti-vax truckers continue to strike over new government rules. And $327 million. That's how much the UN is saying it needs to save 13 million people in Africa who are facing severe hunger as the country experiences its driest conditions on record since 1981. That's all on the way before 7:30. But first, let's head to Russia, where tensions continue with the Ukraine as world leaders worked hard to avoid conflict escalating further as Russia joined forces with Belarus and started 10 days of military drills, a move which has worried leaders worldwide. Earlier in the week, Russia denied it had any plans to invade, despite at least 130,000 troops being positioned within reach of Ukraine's border, with their chief of armed forces even calling claims of an invasion a lie. Ukraine's president has appealed to the West not to spread panic and that the situation remains tense but controlled. Now, if we look at a little bit of the history, Ukraine declared independence from the Soviet Union in 1991, but still has close economic and cultural links. Russia has invaded Ukraine before, and there is long-standing tension. Its core demand is for the West to guarantee Ukraine will not join NATO. However, the rest of the world are undecided. NATO's Secretary-General has said the risk of conflict is very real. The USA say they don't think it'll happen anytime soon, and the UK Prime Minister has said it's the biggest security crisis that Europe has faced for decades. At a meeting in Brussels, the Secretary-General of NATO also said this is a dangerous moment for European security.
This is a dangerous moment for European security. The number of Russian forces is going up. The warning time for a possible attack is going down. NATO is not a threat to Russia, but we must be prepared for the worst, while remaining strongly committed to finding a political solution. I have sent a letter to Foreign Minister Lavrov, reiterating my invitation to Russia to continue our dialogue in a series of meetings in the NATO-Russia Council to find a diplomatic way forward. We are prepared to listen to Russia's concerns and ready to discuss ways to uphold and strengthen the fundamental principles of European security that we all have signed up to. We have proposed mutual briefings on exercises and nuclear policies, ways to increase transparency and reduce risks in military activities, reduce space and cyber threats, and a serious conversation on arms control, including nuclear weapons and ground-based intermediate and short-range missiles.
Now to Morocco, where the story of a boy who fell down a well caught the world's attention and sadly ended in tragedy. 5-year-old Ryan fell into a 32-metre deep well in the village of Igran in Chefchaouen in the northwest of the country. He was trapped there for 4 days as rescue crews attempted to dig deep into difficult terrain at risk of landslide.
I managed to communicate with the child and asked if he could hear me. There was a response. I waited for a minute and saw that he began using the oxygen. I then asked to be lifted back, and in the first attempt I failed. In the second attempt I lost consciousness, especially in the last 10 metres, until I woke up and found people administering first aid on me.
It's unknown how the boy fell into the well. Thousands of people gathered every day on the hilltop where he went missing, offering support to the hundreds involved in the rescue operation. There was hope at the beginning that he would get out safely.
When he disappeared yesterday, I prayed to God and begged him to get out of that well alive and safe. Please, God, ease my pain and his in that hole of dust. I hope the authorities and rescuers managed to save my son.
The boy was being watched through a CCTV camera and was supplied with oxygen and water through pipes, but sadly they were unable to save him. A huge outpour of support and messages of condolences were made to the boy's family.
All
Moroccans have made great efforts for us. Now we are fine and we don't need anything.
Well, thousands gathered for a public funeral on the hillside at a plot of land where some of his relatives have also been buried. Many in attendance said the tragic event has brought the community closer.
The residents of the region and everyone came here for solidarity and brotherhood with the residents of this village.
Now to Afghanistan. While many countries around the world are lifting their final COVID restrictions and others reopening their borders for the first time in months or years, Afghanistan is struggling with a surge of the virus which is battering its fragile healthcare system.
But the worsened situation has been started since 2 weeks ago, and now it is going worsen day by day.
Only 5 hospitals in the country still offer COVID-19 treatment, with 33 others having been forced to close in recent months due to a lack of doctors and supplies.
We faced with difficult situation like lack of oxygen, medicine and other medical supplies. Even our staff did not take the 3 months' salaries.
Well, Afghanistan's healthcare system survived for nearly 2 decades, almost entirely on international donor funding. But it has struggled since the Taliban returned to power in August. The Taliban says it's trying to push vaccines on a sceptical population that often sees them as dangerous.
Right now, up to 3.5 million doses of vaccines we have in stocks, and 5.8 million doses other countries and organizations they promised that they will give you in the near future.
Well, the administration have launched a campaign through mosques and mobile clinics to get more people vaccinated, with only 27% of Afghanistan's 38 million people population having had a jab. Now to China, where a journalist who recently interviewed Peng Shuai has expressed his doubt over how much freedom she actually has. The Chinese tennis star disappeared last year after making a sexual assault claim against a top Chinese official. She has since said there was a huge misunderstanding and that she is retiring from the sport. Well, the accusations made on social media were quickly deleted and Peng was not heard from for nearly 3 weeks. The journalist who interviewed her recently, L'Equipe reporter Mark Ventiac, has said despite her assurances to the contrary, he isn't convinced she's free to say and do what she wants. During a press conference, the International Olympic Committee spokesperson Mark Adams said he was not in a position to decide if there should be an investigation.
To answer your question, I don't think it's a judgment for the IOC to make. We are a sporting organisation and our job is to remain in contact with her and, as we've explained in the past, to carry out personal, quiet diplomacy, to keep in touch with her as we've done, to meet her in person as we've done, and now invite her to Lausanne to see us. She had a long conversation with Kirsty Coventry yesterday, I think, at the curling the day before. So we, as a sports organisation, are doing everything to ensure that she is happy, and I don't think it's up for us to be able to judge in one way, just as it's not for you to judge either in one way or another her position.
Now to the UK, where this week the Queen officially marked 70 years on the throne. The Platinum Jubilee celebrations began with a bang as gun salutes were fired across the country to mark her reign. A series of events will be held for the Queen of England over the next year, who renewed her pledge to the nation and the Commonwealth, saying that her life will always be devoted to their service. Well, later this year, other celebrations include a 4-day bank holiday weekend and a pudding competition for an official Jubilee dessert, which will be served over that weekend. The World This Week continues after the break.
I understand the pandemic, it has taken many lives, but you know what? There's no reason to lose my freedom as well.
We'll be looking at how a convoy of protesting truckers in Canada have brought the capital to a standstill, threatening not to move until the government removes a rule that requires them to be vaccinated. You're watching The World This Week from the London Live News team, a review of the main international stories that have broken over the last 7 days. Still to come before 7:30. In Africa, 13 million people are facing severe hunger and being forced to leave their homes in search of food and water. More on that story shortly, but first, to London now, where the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police has resigned. Dame Cressida Dick's 40-year policing career has come to an end after the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, made it clear to her he no longer had confidence in her leadership abilities. She described her time in the police force as the greatest honour and privilege of her life, but she was left with no choice but to leave.
Following contact with the Mayor of London today, it is quite clear that the Mayor no longer has sufficient confidence in my leadership of the Metropolitan Police Service for me to continue as Commissioner. He has left me no choice but to step aside. I say this with deep sadness and regret. At his request, I have agreed to stay on for a short period, a number of weeks, to ensure the stability of the Met and its leadership, while necessary arrangements can be made for a transition to a new Commissioner.
Well, she was the first woman to become Commissioner, and throughout her long career, she oversaw the 2017 London attacks, the Grenfell fire tragedy, and the pandemic, for which her work was praised. But more recently, the Mayor has not been satisfied with her response to the claims of racism, sexism, and homophobia within the Met. The role of the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police is appointed by the Queen on the advice of the Home Secretary, but the Commissioner cannot do the job without the support of the Mayor.
The recent shocking report by the Independent Office for Police Conduct, which uncovered clear evidence of racism, sexism, homophobia, bullying, discrimination and misogyny by police officers, has further shattered public trust and confidence in the Metropolitan Police Service. In this country, we police by consent. And when trust in the police breaks down to the extent it has, that model and therefore public safety is put at risk. Last week, I made clear to the Metropolitan Police Commissioner the scale of the change I believe is urgently required to rebuild the trust and confidence of Londoners in the Met and to root out racism, sexism, homophobia, bullying, discrimination and misogyny that still exists. I'm not satisfied with the Commissioner's response. It's clear that the only way to start to deliver the scale of the change required is to have new leadership right at the top of the Metropolitan Police.
Now to Canada, where long-haul truckers have been protesting in Ottawa against a government order for them to be vaccinated to cross the border with the US. Well, the capital city has come to a standstill, as has Ambassador Bridge, which is the main artery between the two countries, usually carrying around $300 million of goods each day. The capital's mayor announced a state of emergency as the city centre remained paralysed for nearly 2 weeks, with a so-called Freedom Truck convoy parked up in the city's business district, with protesters saying they'll not leave until all vaccine mandates and COVID-19 restrictions are lifted.
Just for the mandates right now that's going on in Canada, I think it's infringing a lot of people's movements, freedoms. People are isolating way too much now, especially in Quebec.
We're fighting for freedom, my man. We're gonna keep fighting, Trudeau. You have nothing on us, Trudeau. We're gonna win. We're gonna win. We're gonna defeat you, Trudeau. Freedom, freedom, freedom! I understand the pandemic. It has taken many lives, but you know what? There's no reason to lose my freedom as well.
Well, the blaring of horns and traffic disruption has angered residents who fear there's no end in sight after the police chief called it a siege that he could not manage. Canadian ministers are urging the protesters to stop breaking the law.
those participating in the convoy are hurting Canadians. They pose serious dangers for the economy, and they are breaking the law. And no one is above the law. Whatever the frustrations, disagreements, any of those who are participating in the convoy may have with the government's strategy, not only the federal government, but the provincial government and other governments may have with the strategy out of the pandemic, none of that justifies breaking the law. None of that justifies continuing to participate in a convoy.
I very much respect the efforts of our law enforcement officials to bring about a peaceful resolution to this. But I would urge all of those who are engaging in this unlawful activity, think about the people that you are truly hurting and stop. Open those roads, open those bridges, and let people go back to their lives.
Now to the USA, where the global fight against violence towards women continues. Republican and Democratic senators have introduced a bill to reauthorize the Violence Against Women Act through to 2027. Well, it was first passed in 1994 and is the first comprehensive federal law aimed at ending violence against women. Actress and activist Angelina Jolie has been campaigning to get the landmark legislation reauthorized.
The reason that many people struggle to leave abusive situations is that they've been made to feel worthless. When there is silence from a Congress too busy to renew the Violence Against Women Act for a decade, it reinforces that sense of worthlessness. You think, I guess my abuser's right. I guess I'm not worth very much. That's why passing this law is one of the most important votes you as senators will cast this year. Most of all, I want to acknowledge the children who are terrified and suffering at this moment, and the many people for whom this legislation comes too late. The women who have suffered through this system with little or no support, who still carry the pain and trauma of their abuse, the young adults who have survived abuse and emerged stronger, not because of the child protective system, but despite it, and the women and children who have died, who could have been saved.
Well, the reauthorization of the Act faces an uncertain future in the Senate, as it's not clear yet if there'll be enough Republican support to pass it. Now to the Horn of Africa, where they are experiencing its worst drought crisis in a decade. It's estimated 13 million people are facing severe hunger and being forced to leave their homes in search of food and water. This is according to a new report by Save the Children and the United Nations World Food Programme. The country is experiencing its driest conditions on record since 1981. The lack of rain is affecting farming communities, forcing them to leave their homes.
We've not had the last 2 rainy seasons. We have never experienced this before. We only see dust storms now. We're afraid that they will cover us all and become our graveyard, like what happens in the desert.
The UN World Food Programme is saying it needs $327 million to look after 4.5 million people in need over the next 6 months. They're calling for immediate assistance to prevent a major humanitarian crisis, with more forecasts of below-average rainfall threatening to worsen conditions in the coming months.
At this particular moment in time, across the world, is an increase in humanitarian needs resulting from various crises. And that's happening at the same time that many donors are having to either flatline or reduce their commitments to overseas assistance because of the economic impacts that COVID might have had on their own countries. So, you know, this is a real challenge for the region. But what we would certainly encourage is that these investments that we make in early action and early response really save money that will be required later if the situation isn't dealt with now. And we've seen across this region with investments in resilience that $1 that's invested in prevention can save up to $3 in the eventual humanitarian response later.
Well, the UN reiterated the urgency of the situation, saying a children's agency in Ethiopia have said more than 6 million people are expected to need urgent humanitarian aid by as early as mid-March. And in Somalia, more than 7 million people are in need of urgent help. And back to the UK now for the annual Brit Awards, which recognise the best in British and international music. Well, this year it was hosted by comedian Mo Gilligan, who mocked the British Prime Minister following a series of allegations about him having parties during lockdown.
Hello and welcome, gentlemen, to the Brit Awards 2022 in association with MasterCard.
Mo, the thing is, we're actually trying to reduce our carbon emissions.
Okay, Greta Thunberg and them, man. Fair enough.
We were thinking that you could make your own way there.
But the problem is that I've told all the man then that we're going to turn up in white suits like So Solid.
Oh, well, you can bring all the man them.
Yeah?
Yeah. The more man them, the merrier.
International superstar Adele gained huge recognition throughout the night.
Adele, easy on me! Congratulations to Adele, winning the first of her 4 nominations tonight. This award comes 3 months after the release of her latest album, 30, which is also nominated for Album of the Year.
London artists Little Sims, Wolf Alice and Sam Fender all took home prizes that night, as did Billie Eilish.
Thank you guys so much. I am so honored and feel so lucky to be awarded this again.
Ed Sheeran was presented with Songwriter of the Year award. He dedicated it to his supportive wife, Cherry Seaborn, calling her the best in his winner's speech. The songwriter kicked off the show with a surprise performance alongside metal rockers Bring Me the Horizon. The awards ceremony this year featured an all-British lineup of live performances. Well, that's all from the world this week with me, Tanya Francis. We'll see you at 7 next Saturday as we round up the biggest international stories for a global city. Have a lovely evening.